All right. Thank you so much for joining me, by the way. That's really nice.
Of course, my friend. My
Um,
pleasure.
could you please state your name for the record?
My name is Cameron Elgart.
Awesome. Can I call you Cam?
Absolutely. Please.
So would you say that you're part of the local music scene in Boise and the Treasure Valley in general?
Yeah, I'd say at this point, absolutely.
So how do you know you're part of the scene?
Well, I've been playing live shows for a couple of years now. I have a bunch of friends that are in bands. I love supporting them, and I love the music scene here. And I think, yeah, that's probably enough there.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. How long do you think you've been part of the scene? Just since you've been playing shows, or were you kind of like going to shows before that or anything like that?
Yeah, like a little bit before. I'd say I played my first show with the Phets. It was like November of 2017, something like that.
Oh, cool.
And like that summer, like before that, I was at the Hive all the time. Like
Oh, that's cool.
I remember, I remember seeing a punk band that's no longer around called Throat Honey. My buddy Ethan was in that band.
Oh, I
They were
saw
the
Throat Honey
shit.
one
They kind
time
of
too.
blew my
Yeah,
mind.
I've seen Throat Honey too, actually. That's
That's so
weird.
funny. They were like my first. It was my first punk rock show, and it really like opened my brain, and I started going to shows. So I'd say like that summer.
That's awesome. Were you like
Yeah.
16 or 17 when that
Yeah,
happened?
like 16,
Yeah,
16, I think. Yeah.
that's so cool. I saw Throat Honey at like a tiny house show. Like
That's
I don't
dope.
even remember where it
These
was.
guys
It
are
was
cool, man.
yeah. So when that kind of that first experience for you, when it opened your eyes, where you kind of found that kind of music community within Boise, was there something specific that really attracted you to it?
Um, well, I'd always been playing music, and at that time, I was like jamming in the garage with Hayden and our buddy Paris, and like just playing shitty garage covers of like the Black Keys and Nirvana and whatever, like what you do when you're a teenager. We've been
Yeah,
doing that for a couple. We've been doing that for a while. Like I've been jamming with my buddy Paris for years, and I don't know what really got me to the Hive. I don't know. I might have just been looking it up, but I'd always been playing music, and so like once I found out there was like shows, I was like, holy shit, like we got to go.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you've had obviously your first experiences with the Hive and stuff, and I'm sure by now you've played and gone to shows at a bunch of venues. But just with your experience with going to shows and listening to local music, what are some genres or styles that you've identified in kind of the Boise music scene?
Okay. For this, I think Boise has like I talk about this a lot with my friends, but like there's like the Boise sound, which is like the disciple. Everyone's like a disciple of like the built to spill like indie sound like that. Everyone has a little bit of that. There's a lot of bands that go that way, especially in like the older scene. Uh, there's some punk bands that are pretty tight, pretty cool. I know there's like indie pop and like dreamy, good bedroom pop stuff. Uh, like my band VEMM and College Level and this band SugarPillz that's no longer with us, unfortunately. But there's some like alt rock with bands like the Phets and I'm trying to think here. Let me look real quick.
Yeah, no worries.
There's some classic rock. My buddy Noble and his band Captain SNAFU, like some straight up out of the 70s. I'm gonna shout out some bands here while we're
Oh, for
talking.
for sure, and I'll probably splice in some audio clips too, so it'll work out great.
Cool, yeah. So there's like alt rock with bands like Corduroy Blue, Phets, um, Maids and Monitors. Those guys are down in Twin Falls though. Um, so I'd say the big ones are probably small punk rock scene, but it's so like uh, how do I put this? Like definitive that it deserves to be put up there. So like we got punk rock, we got indie rock, indie pop, whatever. So that's like VEMM, College Level. and then alt rock. Those are the three big ones.
It's awesome. Do you think any of those styles or maybe any others are kind of unique to the Boise area? Like,
I don't know. I think everyone's playing rock and roll, but like I said, like that Boise sound, like
yeah,
everyone that's listened to Built to Spill when they were teenagers kind of sounds like them. I don't
yeah,
know.
for sure. Do you think that the genres you find in Boise, even if they are similar genres to other regions, do you think they define more than the music that's played? Do you think they define the fan base, like who the fans are, what they believe in, and how they present themselves?
Hmm. I think with metal, definitely. I should have
Yeah,
said that too. Like there's a metal scene here, some heavy bands. I think that's kind of a part of metal. I mean, I don't know. I'm not really a metalhead by any means, but I think what's super special about the Boise music scene and a lot of my friends' bands is like we all play different genres of music, but like we'll all still play a show together and like we'll all still be fans of each other. So I'm not sure if the Boise music scene is established enough yet to have that sort of clicky mentality. I mean, I'm kind of out of the loop when it comes to the older bands and the people that have been in the scene for a while, but as far as like my friends go and all of the younger bands, like it's pretty like a homogenous group of people supporting each other.
that's really cool. Do you think that leads
Yeah.
to like so when you have a bunch of people who, even though they played a bunch of different styles, but they go to each other's shows and they like each other's music, do you think that leads to kind of some genre, um, I guess, intermingling? Like, since your friends are in, stylistically different bands, do you see a lot of like genre crossover within music here?
Um, yeah, definitely. I think everyone kind of has their own sound, but I hope like down the road that we're influenced by each other. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't think any of us have really been around long enough to really like see the effects of something like that.
Yeah,
But I think I like that's just what happens with musicians. I feel like you just collaborate, you're around each other, whatever, and then you kind of steal stuff from each other. So I look forward to that day.
yeah, for sure. Um, Earlier, you also were kind of like mentioned a couple times of how like there's kind of an older set of bands or maybe older music scene that you're not as familiar with, but it sounds like the one you're referencing mostly is people like around our age, like late high school to early college. Um,
Yeah.
do you think the Boise music scene is specifically driven by youth culture, or do you think there's also kind of a part of it that's maybe some older people in their later 20s or early 30s?
um, well, I'll give you my opinion. It's by no means fact because I am like part of the younger scene, so it's kind of hard to have an external view at this. But like as I was like in the band and everything and getting the band together and starting to play shows, like it kind of felt like there was this dichotomy of like we're the young band or like we are the young bands, and those are the guys that have been around forever. Like those are the guys that know what they're doing. But as I've met a lot of these people and like hung out with them and gone to their shows, it's really not like that. I mean, like the biggest thing that really separates us is just age. I mean, there's no, I don't know, like bad blood or anything in between the two, like the older bands, and I did air quotes there, and the younger bands. It's just like we're not friends because we're 10 years apart or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. So within that younger scene, do you think there's kind of like a shared rhetoric? Because like obviously every generation has their own way of speaking, like a slang
Uh-huh.
or something like that. Do you think within the younger scene, it's kind of maybe the rhetoric you find in the music or just people hanging out at shows is informed by youth culture?
That's a good question. I think it's hard to like put a blanket statement on all the bands, and I think some bands are more like aware of their message and more in tune of what they want to say than others. So because some bands just want to go out and play, and some bands just want to go out and have fun and make people dance and just have a good time, and other bands I could think of that like want to spread a specific message or maybe have a political side or whatever. So like as far as rhetoric goes, I think people are aware of their audience and aware of what they want to do and aware of what they want to do with their music, and that's what affects what they're saying the most. So not so much like youth culture, but like, and outside external influences, but more like what they want to say. You know, it's like that decorum aspect where they're
Yeah,
aware of their audience and whatnot.
that's super cool. Like the bands you've been in, like the Phets, do you guys have kind of, do you think you guys have kind of like a centralized message or rhetoric that you're delivering to your audience and that tends to attract a certain fan base?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm the drummer, so you know, I help write the songs and whatnot, but I'm definitely not um, the quarterback in that department. You know, I know Thomas, the lead singer, definitely has a much better grasp as far as like what the message is of each song, I'd say, but I think as a whole, it's really more of like experiential and like how do I put this, like experience based, I guess. Like we're not really going for, hey, let's push this message or do whatever, blah blah blah. Like of course we do that on the side to make a positive impact or whatever, but as far as our shows and our music go, our biggest thing is making experience for everyone and something that everyone can come in. So I guess it's less of a message and more of like an experience, I'd say, when it comes to the Phets.
That's really cool though, because I think like I don't remember, like don't quote me on this, but I remember where I read this, but millennials and like the generation below, they're more privy to like drop money on like vacations or experiences or like Coachella or something like that than like material possessions. So I think that's
Right.
really intermingled with youth culture as well.
Interesting. I like that. Yeah, absolutely.
And you guys really do make it experience. I've gone to a few of the Fetch shows, and like when you guys played at Dead Proof, like I noticed that with your new song, the music video, it like incorporated parts of your performance, like Thomas with the phone and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was so cool. Um, so kind of stemming off of that, so maybe the Fets or like maybe, so you said you guys don't necessarily, like when you're performing or playing music, you're not super focused on a specific message. You just, you know, it's an experiential thing, which I totally agree with. But do you think artists within the scene, do you think they have any lyrical carryover? Like maybe there's topics that artists sing about because they're from Boise that you might not hear in other regions?
Yeah. Um, well, I'll tell you this. I'm probably not the best person to answer this because I really don't listen to lyrics very often. Definitely a groove-based listener. But as far as I know, I haven't really like okay, I guess in some I don't know what to say here, but like I've seen punk rock bands that like play punk rock songs about like fuck the man and everything like that. But I've also seen indie pop dance music where it's just about having a good time and spending the time away or with it, whatever, dancing with your loved ones or so like I don't know. I don't know about lyrical content as much. I guess I could answer on the behalf of like the Phets music. It's definitely more towards like that story uh, aspect of lyrical writing, where it's like you create a story for someone to get invested in, or you create a story for someone to listen and relate to. So that's really as much as I can put forth for that one.
That's still super cool though, because like I think you could almost identify that as a Boise trait. Like I think another band that does that really well is King and Queen of the Losers. I think
Oh yeah,
they're definitely story based too. Well, at least that's what I get from it when I listen to them. Um,
totally.
and kind of actually continuing to use that band as an example. Next, I was going to talk about kind of internet culture, and I think especially like
Uh-huh.
that is a band so tapped in to internet and like millennial culture and kind of the, I guess, existentialism of it. Um,
Yeah.
do you see kind of in the Boise scene, do you see internet culture, like you could say like meme culture or like Reddit or 4chan shit or whatever, like do you see that kind of like bleeding in to some of the musical ideas? And again, this is a like kind of another lyrical question, so if it's something you don't want to discuss, that's totally
Yeah.
fine.
uh, no, we're gonna discuss it. That's cool. I think as far as the internet goes, there's a couple bands that come to mind that are like definitely like the forerunners of that in this Boise music scene that are really like in tune with their internet following. And I think King Queen and Losers is a great example of that. I mean, they have their YouTube and their Instagram and everything that's just like kind of part of their image as well. And I think as a Phets, it's kind of our, like, for an example, we try to make our social media like an extension of that experience, you know, an extension of what you get on stage. So you kind of feel what our brand is and everything. And I think other bands can probably do it better than us, really like put it out there and put out more content. And I think more bands should be doing that, but I really don't know of like younger bands that have really like blew me away in that internet aspect. Besides maybe like King Queen of Losers and Raccoon Tour comes to mind as well with Nate Burr.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really cool concept though, because I think today when you think of music and internet, you think promotion, you know, knowing where
Right.
shows are, buying music. But I like the idea that you're using the internet beyond promotion. It's like, and I've seen your website, it's like beautifully designed, and it does really feel like going to one of your shows because it's dark, it's kind of dark, you know, and you kind of
Yeah.
it kind of fits the album art of your EP, and it is really like well done. So that's very interesting. I never thought
Awesome.
about
Thank
it
you.
that way. But on the promotion side of
Yeah.
it, how do you think, like, obviously music stuff like Bandcamp and just, you know, finding bands online, has really changed the world of music in a huge way in the last like 25 years. How do you think that's affected
Absolutely.
bands on a local level?
Well, I think it's, I mean, obviously there's pros and cons to the internet music industry that we have right now, internet-based music industry that is, but I think it's really cool because at this point anybody can make it from anywhere, you know, and being in Boise and making music in Boise where it's really never been like the place for music, it's never been like really put on the map aside from like, I don't know, maybe Built to Spill, Tree People, Magic Sword, Youth Lagoon, all these bands that did make it, like they didn't stay here and make it. Like if you think of like, I mean, cliche example, but like Seattle in the 90s, like that's kind of what I want Boise to become, is like a place where there's just a bunch of bands making it all at once. I think the internet is going to be a great tool to get like external fans because we have a pretty homogenous population in Boise, which is unfortunate. I would really like to have more diversity and everything, but uh, using the internet as a tool to get more fans from out of state and across the world can really amplify your local presence as well. So I think that's why the internet is a great tool for young bands.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think something like Tree Fort kind of has a similar impact because it's
Yeah,
bands come from everywhere, and it's almost like a metaphor for the internet. Like Tree Fort, you have like a little bit of everything, and it's all happening. I don't know. It's kind of interesting, but
that's a good point. Yeah,
yeah. That would, yeah, I wonder why bands leave. I guess it is just kind of that, and that kind of goes back to rhetoric too. I guess it is just kind of that perception of Boise is not necessarily an artist hive, but one
yeah,
thing that's kind of interesting, although this may change in the years to come, is it's relatively cheap to live here. And I think that's something an artist needs. So like
right,
if you're committed, if you're really into music or whatever art you're pursuing, you might not be making the big bucks initially.
right. I mean, I hear all the time like Boise is becoming the next Portland or whatever. It's like baby Portland or Portland
Yeah.
Junior, whatever. And like I hope for it to one day be like a cultural hub and where artistry is really put on the map, you know?
Yeah. All right. So I'm just gonna ask a few more questions just to wrap up a little bit. Um, do you think
Cool.
there's any negative aspects that you can find in the music scene and maybe the rhetoric that's used in it or surrounds it?
Um, I guess, yeah, there's obviously, I mean, there's negativity in any scene, any wherever, you know, but aside from the trivial stuff and on the surface stuff, I think if people really like kind of walked the walk in a way, I guess, let me explain that. Like, uh, everyone, or maybe not everyone, but a lot of bands have that dream of making it, you know, and have the dreams of being a serious musician that tours the world and everything, or whatever, like the whole 9 yards, whatever, be a rock star. And I think if bands in Boise kind of took it to that level, you know, like not really saying pretended to be that, but acted that way. Like if you act the way that you want to be, like you'll get there eventually, you know. And I feel like I've seen in Boise a lot of bands that are like, yeah, fuck, we're in Boise, we're just gonna play bars the rest of our lives. Like settle, you know. There's no competition here, you know, and there's like good sides and bad sides to that. And like a great side to that is that everyone's super supportive and everyone has each other's back for the most part. But the negativity out of that is like when you're competing in a way or when you have that external pressure, it can push you to do great things and bigger things. And I think that's one of the things that's lacking from the Boise music scene is people that are serious and like not necessarily cutthroat, but like really pushing the limits of what can be done with shows and branding and bands in general. And then I lost my train of thought, but you kind of get where I'm going, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like, it's kind of an attitude of, I'm not in a hub of, I guess you could say, professional creativity. So I probably won't have a professional like
Right.
attitude around my work. Um, not to say that
Yeah,
you don't put it,
that's what I
not
was
to
gonna
say
say.
that you don't
Right.
write great songs and put on great music. It's more of like taking it that extra step, which I think, you know, I would argue the Phets are doing that because you guys have a really professional setup with your internet presence online and you know, all that.
Awesome. Thank you. Well,
Yeah.
I hope that by doing so, it pushes bands my age and even bands older than us that are to do more of that. Because if we were in LA or if we were in New York, like it is cutthroat, you know, like the music industry is like everyone is out to get each other. You know, you are trying to make it. You're like, you really have to push yourself to do these great things. And that's why I think the Boise music scene is like a ticking time bomb and is going to blow up because we're not there yet, but there's still so much talent. Like nobody's out to get each other. It's a very supportive community. And
Hmm.
so if we can kind of set the bar there and say, yes, we're going to have great bands. Yes, we're going to be commercially successful, whatever. But we're all going to support each other while we're doing that. I think that's what's going to put Boise music scene on the map.
That's super cool. So like an attitude of inclusivity, but healthy competition in a way.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So like one thing too, like taking a step back, we're talking about how people don't take it too seriously. I kind of wonder if that's also a product of like the prevalent trends in indie rock, like I guess slacker rock, like which is
Yeah.
I think an ironic title because you look at people like Mac DeMarco and Courtney Barnett who kind of get the slacker rock label, and they're like two of the hardest working touring, you know, album making musicians ever. So I wonder if that's kind of
Right.
like an issue with perception.
Totally. I definitely think there is an issue there for a lot of people. I mean, it can be labeled whatever you want, like slacker rock, indie rock, but like those people are making great albums and
Yeah.
they're working day and night to do so and create them their own way. And even if they're not and it comes naturally to them or whatever, it's still hard work. Like that's a misconception about any music is that it's easy.
Yeah. I think in Boise too, I think it I think there's a lot of rhetoric and just the lifestyle around Boise that there's no struggle in Boise, I would argue, right? Like you said, we have a very
Yeah.
homogenized population. Everyone's about middle class for the most part. Obviously that's a huge assumption. Not everyone's middle class in Boise. There's just a large population
Yeah,
of
I'm with
that,
you.
especially with like kind of the Meridian
Right.
vibes. But and I think because we don't, I don't know, it's a very laid back community. I think
Right.
I don't think there's a lot of strong politics in Boise on either side. I think it's like pretty moderate, and I think maybe that's part of it too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think of the demographic that makes up the most of the population, like middle class white folk, maybe moderate, maybe liberal, maybe conservative. It's not like you said, it's not really pushing any boundary there. And I think
Yeah.
some great like artistry really comes from, and creativity comes from like that struggle, you know, like having that basis of like, I'm gonna live in my van and make rock and roll and whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't really get that vibe here.
Yeah. Like this is kind of a far and away comparison, but I always wondered if the British invasion wasn't like an effect of World War II, because all of the kids who would, go on to be like Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, they're all in England and they all like were kids during, the Blitzkrieg. And I kind of wonder if like something a huge like, this is awful to say, but with the current COVID crisis, I kind of wonder like, I
Yeah.
wonder if another wave of just awesome music, whatever genre maybe, will come out of just a lot, worldwide tension.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, all these kids are locked in their bedrooms making records, you know. I mean, that's what I've been
Yeah.
doing at least to pass the time. Like, I think that's a great point and would be a really positive thing to come out of this whole mess.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've already gone on Bandcamp and like listened to a few records that are complete concept records based on COVID, which is really interesting.
Really
Yeah.
nice.
So just like one last question to kind of wrap up a little bit, and this kind of takes a step back when we're just talking about kind of the attitude in Boise. Do you think people who are outside of the local scene, whether they live in another city or they just don't participate in the Boise music scene much, do you think they have a perception of the
Yeah,
music scene, like they view it as deviant or positive or anything like that?
interesting. So, as far as like localities go that are nearby, I played a couple shows in Twin and down in Rexburg and like Boise. You kind of get the vibe that Boise is kind of like the big time, you know, like think of Twin Falls, if you think of Rexburg, where kind of spitballing here, but like, I don't know, 100,000 people, 200,000 people live there barely, you know, and it's spread out over miles and miles of farmland and or agriculture. Like, as far as the rest of Idaho goes, like the music scene is Boise. Like a lot of these bands go through Boise, whether it be Tree Fort or playing shows with other bands that they know. So I think the perception of the music scene as far as the state of Idaho goes is probably pretty high because it's like the only one. And in regards to like out of towners and people that come here and play and the people that I've met that are from out of town, like we played it with a band from Eugene and they Eugene, Oregon. Their name was Chromatic Colors. Great band, just mind-blowingly tight. So great. They came down and played with us at Death Proof, and like they said that was one of the like better shows on their tour or whatever they were on or whatever because of that community. But I think overall it's small, you know. A lot of bands I've heard like, yeah, Boise music scene is small, whatever, but I think it's growing and people nationally are kind of getting that as far as I know. I mean, I'm not really in tune with a ton of national bands or whatever, but a lot of the bands that I have met throughout my tenure in the scene have been pretty like either neutral or like happy to be there or like pretty positive. Like I haven't heard anybody say Boise music scene fucking sucks and I'm never going here again.
That's super cool. And I mean, it's great to have positivity from, touring bands who want to play here, because I think that also brings more attention to the area. But
Yeah.
I really like the point you made of like in the smaller towns of like essentially rural Idaho, how like they view Boise as, like you said, the big time, where here we're talking about how Boise is like pretty minimal. And so I guess
Exactly.
it all just goes back to perception and the dialogue you have about places. That's so interesting.
Right. I mean, if you think of like Pocatello or Rexburg, these really, I mean, small towns in the larger scheme of things, there's probably one or 1 to 5 bands, let's say, in the whole town. You know, that's just the amount of people that are playing music together.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, I mean, those communities are pretty cool. I know Rexburg, where BYU Idaho is, puts on really cool shows. They have a venue there called the Basement, which is super rad. But like, if the Boise music community is tight knit, like that is what tight knit really is. It's like those rural Idaho bands that are playing to their friends, you know?
Yeah. That's funny. I
Yeah.
was talking to Carson about that because he was telling about a show he did with Jack in Rexburg. And he
Yeah.
said that it's kind of like we were talking about a youth music scene and an older music scene. He said in
Yeah.
Rexburg, because it's kind of a very different college town from Boise, it's kind of an
Yeah.
older scene. Like it's kind of kids who are, or I guess adults who are like late college or out of college. And he said that something he noticed is that you don't have as many, like, they don't focus as much on like maybe edgy or, kind of young person focused lyrics. And the songwriting, he said the bands he saw, the songwriting was just incredible. Like they were more instrumentally focused than lyrically, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. That is interesting. Yeah. I wonder if there is a comparison there with like young bands that maybe don't have the chops yet. So they focus more on the lyrics, you know?
Yeah.
Just playing
That's how
some
I,
cowboy chords and speaking the truth.
yeah, that's how I always felt about punk music or like certain aspects of alternative rock. Like they were good musicians, right? But I think they kind of like maybe put instrumentation on a slight backseat to lyrical importance, which I guess it just all comes down to the artist and what they want to do. But
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. There's definitely something to be said there for sure.
yeah. All right. Well, that about does it. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you want to expand on or say before we call it quits?
Um, well, it was a pleasure to talk to you, Sam. If there's anybody that's going to listen to this, check out my bands, the Phets and VEMM. The Phets just released a new music video for their song Acceleration, and VEMM will have some more material coming here shortly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cam.
Absolutely, Sam. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.
All right. See you.
See ya.